I am so conservative.
Rationalize in my head. These are things I read in the
I'm going to talk
scripture.
about Willow Creek.
Okay.
Willow Creek, a few years back, had
Remembered at the time when Will Rogers said, I don't belong to any organized religion. I'm a Baptist.
Yeah. I am so conservative. If you didn't jump to conclusions, you might not get any exercise. I am so conservative. I am so conservative. Welcome to the Unknown Webcast. I am completely aware that some, perhaps many even, will be offended by what I am about to say, but here goes anyway. I really am so conservative I can't turn left even when I'm driving. That includes being theologically conservative. I want to know and believe what is true, and I'm willing to challenge what I believe. On the other hand, there are many of reviewers, and we're aware of that, who are in fear of having their ideas challenged and may lead to actually thinking and testing their beliefs, and they are terrified of that. For them, this is a trigger warning. This is not a safe space for those who may be easily offended by having their idea challenged, or maybe even by our commercials. Today's August 18, 2020, and this is broadcast number 203. This is the first time our guest, Pastor Daniel Weyand, joins us, and he may live to regret that. He is a pastor of Sunrise Baptist Church in Bonne Terre, Missouri, which has been hosting the Witnesses Now for Jesus Midwest Convention for the past few years. And we will engage in talking about ministering to former cult members. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast. And our senior researcher, co-host, and resident COVID-19 tracker is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast. And here is Ronnie Baby.
Greetings from sunny Florida, where the sun came, where the palm trees came out, saw their shadows, and now we have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsors for this webcast include Two Great Faiths That Taste Great Together, Reese's Jesus Buddha Cups, and the Heresy Conservation Board, ensuring sustainable errors for the 21st century and beyond, the Heresy Conservation Board. And if you enjoy this webcast, or if it really annoys you and you'd like to inflict it on somebody else to ensure continued access to it, please go to midwestoutreach.org and click the yellow donate button and contribute as you feel led. And don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. Welcome, Daniel Weyand of Sunrise Baptist Church in some other part of the country.
And by the way, just to make all of that really easy for everyone, if they go down to the bottom, see, I got my finger almost in the right place. Go down to the bottom in the description. There's links to Sunrise Baptist Church. There's links to Midwest Christian Outreach. There's links to our donate button. And there's links to an article we have posted up there, Fear of Flying, for those who want to understand why it's sometimes so hard to difficult to leave cults. Another one is Trapped in the Vision of the Anointed, and a book I would recommend for pastors who may be looking at ministering to those leaving cults and other groups. It's called Out of the Cults and Into the Church. What is it that they're experiencing when they leave? Daniel has some of that knowledge firsthand because he has some former Jehovah's Witnesses I know who are part of his congregation. Welcome, Daniel.
Hey, thank you so much, Don. Ron, it's nice to be able to be here on your guys' podcast, and thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, and now you know we're glad to have you, and when we're done, you will know for sure you have been had.
I think I'll be able to be fine. I think we can handle this. Anytime to be able to have a good conversation about something, there's nothing wrong with that.
I agree. I have really enjoyed getting to know you over the last 3 years or so that I have been down there. I think you've been doing that for 4 years now, right? That conference.
Yeah, I believe so. We started out in a small location in an adjacent town that was kind of a public space. And whenever I got to get to know Charles, the guy that actually puts that together, I told him, I said, man, I want to be able to be a part of this. I want to be able to encourage you. And I think that there's ways that we could do this and be able to have some better things going on too. Just because I told him, I said, if you use our church, we've got a stage already and we got a sound system already and a projector already set up and room for food and other stuff. And just come on and bring it over here to Sunrise. And we'd love to be able to partner with you. And so that's been a partnership that we've had for the last 3 years. And I haven't talked with him, but I hope we continue to do it here at Sunrise for many more years.
Well, I've been excited about it. I feel really served when I go there because not only do they have a place for food, they have food.
Yeah.
And people serving it.
Well, I just going to go ahead and let you guys know I'm a Southern Baptist, and part of being a Southern Baptist is that I know how to eat, and we know how to feed each other and enjoy that time and spend time fellowship with one another.
It is really important. So how did you get engaged then? Let me back up for a second. Not all Southern Baptist churches are necessarily attuned to what it's like dealing with former cult members, former New Agers, former whatever. One of the obstacles that we run into, Midwest Christian Outreach, is when someone has left a group, whether it's New Age, a Jehovah's Witness, Mormon, and they start looking for a church, they are sorely disappointed very often, and is sometimes highly offended.
Yeah.
We had a branch director in Florida. She's gone home to be with the Lord now. She had been a Jehovah's Witness for 43 years. Tough lady. I would not have wanted to have been on the other side of a table arguing with her over the Watchtower doctrine, I don't think. But she came to the faith marvelously, her and her husband and her entire family, after 43 years, and decided that she would work the rest of her life at least as hard for the true God of Scripture as she did for the Watchtower. But nearly every time she spoke in a church or was attending a church, people would come up to her and say, "You look too smart to have been a Jehovah's Witness," as though somehow intelligence has the ability to prevent you from being saved.
Or somehow it was their intelligence that got them saved.
Yes.
That's a dangerous thought too, though.
Yeah, it is. Both dangerous thoughts. So, having said that, let's open the floor and let you start waxing eloquent. What are your thoughts? And then we'll see where our discussion goes from here.
Yeah, sure. So whenever it comes to having people inside your church, especially whenever you got people that are coming from a cult background, the very first thing I have to admit going into it is there is so much I don't know. And I think that's a big part of it. I'm learning more and more, and I'm learning more and more regularly whenever it comes to, the Jehovah's Witnesses, or whenever it's coming to, any of these other groups. Really, I am learning more and more. I'm learning more and more about the Jehovah's Witnesses, partly because of my interactions with Charles and him being a part of our church. But there's a lot I don't know. And so I think that's a big thing, because it's really easy, I think, for us to assume that whenever we go to our church, we're going to sit across the table in Sunday school from Jimmy that we've known for all of our life. We share many tastes and ideas, and there's so much, maybe we even vote the same way or something like that, and so there's a lot of assumptions that you and I and whoever else is inside here obviously has to be very much like me, very little difference at all. And I think that that's something that we need to be ready to jettison that out the window very quickly. One of the things that I've enjoyed is getting to know people as they visited our church, because even the people that I think that I have an idea who they might be, I learn later on that there is so much more to that individual, so much more to their story that got them to that point, that even got them to that morning whenever they finally got dressed for church and came on into church for the first time. And there's a whole lot of background story there in that regard.
Okay. Now I got myself lost. I hate it when I do that.
Well, I think you're somewhere in the background, somewhere hidden away.
Oh, there you are. There I am. Hey, there I am. I popped up.
What are the main? Okay, so like another. Did we already mention that another disappointment is that they really don't think cult apologetics is a worthwhile endeavor very often?
No, we didn't mention that.
Well, okay. So inside the church, though, you're going to have that. I've encountered that just a little bit. So one of the things that we have done in the last couple of years is we've tried to introduce apologetics to the church, and we've kind of done it slowly. We do once every the first Sunday night of every month. We've not been doing it through COVID because of all the weirdness with all of that, but we had been doing it every first Sunday night of the month. And so we would come together and we'd have a different setup. We'd pull the chairs out of the sanctuary, bring in tables and set up chairs around the tables, have some kind of a worksheet, that kind of thing. We'd try and have somebody who's got some ability to speak on a subject and present for a longer period of time, provide the ability to ask questions back and forth. Because what you end up finding, especially at the beginning, was that there were a lot of people that heard the word apologetics and you just immediately shut down. That's a word for seminary people, or that's a word for somebody else, but that's not for me. You know, I do my thing. I raise my kids. I don't need apologetics. I just need Jesus and we can go. And so like, that's been a big thing, is trying to show that apologetics plays a very important role in the life of a believer. And then also showing them that there's ways that you can do it. Because I think we also have maybe a bad taste in our mouth with some apologetics. We see that there are some people that, man, all they're looking for is to win an argument, or to be able to put another notch in, however they need to do to be able to prove their worth, that kind of thing. And I think that's a real problem. I've also encountered people who have told me that, and this is me dealing with people inside my church, who have told me that in their understanding of apologetics in the past, it seems like there's a couple of different kinds of apologetics, but it seems like a lot of it is apologetics for apologetic people. Okay. For apologetics for people who are practicing apologetics. In other words, you use apologetics to be able to look good in the eyes of other people who care about apologetics. And so these are some of the ideas that we've really had to try and overcome as we're bringing up this topic, and as we're talking about how the Bible just basically gives us the instruction to be ready to make a defense for the hope that's within us.
When I was a new Christian and looking for how and where I fit in the what you might call the ministry spectrum of the church, where am I going to serve? I was told pretty early that some of your biggest opposition to doing the Lord's work will come from Christians themselves. And I found that to be no more true. In fact, the most true in apologetics ministry. I can't say I've tried every other kind of ministry. And I will say that one thing I've really come to appreciate over the years is just how much opposition pastors face. Mm-hmm. For all kinds of opposition, complaints, disagreements, out and out sabotage by some members. So, you're really very, very often pastors are going into a lion's den just by taking a church.
Well, and the seven word complaint, right? That everybody does.
We never did it that way before. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
That's a pretty old one. The 7 last words of a dying church. It has different names. Then there's also a guy named Dean Inge, I don't know how he pronounced it, but he said there are 2 kinds of fools. One who says this is old, therefore it is good. The other who says this is new, therefore it is better. So in any case, but with apologetics, I've come up with a little theory, and that is when you get opposition to apologetics, a lot of times it's because the person who's giving you this opposition has a theory or a philosophy of evangelism that they've decided fits whatever their personality is comfortable with. That's what everybody should be comfortable with. So, I've heard all kinds of different excuses for why not to try to reach Jehovah's Witnesses. Why not? There's the anecdotal excuse. I heard this, believe it or not, from a Bible college professor. He says his excuse was his dad had tried to reason with one once, and every time his dad pulled out a verse, the guy just claimed it was mistranslated. Now, it was actually his dad was trying to reach a Jehovah's Witness, and this was in the days before the New World Translation. So So naturally, they didn't have their own Bible to carry around. Yet they would soon. What was it? The early 1950s. They came out with the New World Translation.
1950 was the first one. Yeah, the first
Yeah.
part of it. Yeah.
So, anyways, another excuse. I was actually confronted with a person who said, by a person who said, "Well, they already have the Bible. We shouldn't be trying to be missionaries to them, or if they already have the Bible, then we should go to people who don't have the Bible." Well, okay, this is another one of those. If it fits me in my comfort zone, in her comfort zone, she had missionaries in her family. She had
So it's the missiology excuse.
Yeah, this is the missiology excuse. My philosophy of missions is if you already have the Bible, if you already have God's word, then we don't. And I said, well, they have a mistranslated Bible. Oh, but that's still the Bible.
No.
So,
No.
Those are excuses why not to do apologetics to people out there. I've had people come to me and say, we had a speaker in and they said Mormons don't believe that Jesus is God. And I ask them, and they do believe Jesus is God. I said, and then I have to unknot all of that because they were badly informed about Mormonism. Yes, they believe Jesus is God, sort of. You just have to understand that he was born on another planet, along with all the rest of us who were born on another planet, to a Mormon God and one of his many Mormon wives. And then he came here and got a body. And then he became God, and you and I can become gods too. So it's a matter of definition. But when someone is coming in then from a group like that, as Audrey had pointed out, some find that the church isn't much different than what they had left.
Yeah.
Why is that, and how do we overcome that?
As far as them not seeing a whole lot different, I think that's partly because we're not explaining ourselves well enough. Whenever I say Jesus Christ, I mean Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the second person of the Trinity. That's what I mean whenever I'm talking about him, as opposed to somebody else who might have a different understanding of who Jesus is as a God or something like that. I think we've got to be really careful and be ready to be able to provide those definitions, be able to get those points out there. You see, that's one of the big things is that, like, whenever we got somebody that comes in, for me, I gotta do a lot of checking my own self on the assumptions that I make. I gotta make the assumption that I can't make the assumption that the person that's coming into the church is Christian. I think a lot of pastors are probably already there on that one. Just because we recognize that many people are not Christian that come into the church. They're looking for help. They're looking to be able to solve a hurt. They're curious and want to be able to see what's going on. Or maybe they've got some kind of a cultural Christianity going on in their life. So that one's easy. But whenever somebody comes in, they've already got a Bible. It looks like they've got something in their hand. You got to be careful because they might not be a Christian. And then also, if they're coming in and they're coming from a cult, the other assumption you can't make is that they might not be orthodox in their view for their particular cult that they're coming from. It's been a while back, but actually I had a conversation with a guy, and he got pretty upset at what had been said, and a large part of that had to do with the fact that his beliefs, even though they were from the cult that he was a part of, they were not orthodox for his group. And so it was really kind of hard because there was some assumptions in my mind. I know that this is what's orthodox or what's believed for that particular group, and as I'm having these conversations, asking these questions, I'm being told things like, well, that's not what we believe, and I'm thinking, I thought it was, and so having to back away from those kinds of assumptions. And then the last assumption that I have to be careful not to make is that the fact that even if they are coming from a cult, if they are coming from a different perspective, they're honestly looking for what the church has to hold. They might still have some very fond memories that are associated with the way that they were brought up. And so you can't just crack a joke, or just assume that they're as ready to be able to throw it all away and leave it behind as we might.
When somebody though says that some find the church isn't much different from what they left, the first thing my mind goes to is the fact that, the church has sinners in it. The church has fallible, frail people that I don't know if that's what Audrey RV was trying to indicate or not. There are people with messed up lives, and now if I understand what it's like to be in the Watchtower Society, this is based on, I've never been a member of it. I have had lots of friends who have been members of it. And what they tell me is that there's a lot of image maintenance that goes on. If you're a Jehovah's Witness, you're trying to project an image to the fellow Jehovah's Witnesses that you're okay. I mean, nobody's there. You're going to say that you're imperfect, but you're going to work as hard as you can to hide all the imperfections and be this super person that they are trying to say you need to be in order to get into the kingdom. What you find out, though, I've read a lot of books by ex-Jehovah's Witnesses as well, and this very often is one of the things that leads them out, is when they discover that, I mean, we're talking not just little failures, we're talking major failures, major moral failures that are being covered up among the leadership,
Yeah.
And this is part of the disillusionment. Then they leave there and they go into another church or a Christian church, and they find sometimes the same thing.
Right.
Except, and well, sometimes I have to admit, we do our share of trying to cover things up. It's not usually based on the idea of works for salvation, but sometimes it might as well be. I mean, we spend so much energy projecting.
Well, or it could be image maintenance, which you alluded to.
Right,
before.
it's image maintenance where It's almost like we're sanctified by what? Is it grace or is it just not sinning?
Right. Right.
Are we working this up on our own to avoid what happens when we fall? How do we handle it? To whom, if anyone, do we confess it? Now, there's a whole hornet's nest of issues there. I don't believe in going around airing your dirty laundry all over the place. I think that's a very unhealthy thing. But there is a place for understanding that people in your congregation have a past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's room for that. It's just you need to be cautious and discreet and very, very concerned about the individual's privacy and dignity. But a lot sometimes the faults, the sins are right there on the surface. Nobody has to say, he's got a problem with shooting his mouth off. Nobody has to say that. That brother over there, he's got a problem with his temper. I don't know. I'm just between you and me and everybody else who notices it. So we find out that these are fragile, fallible human beings. And but this is God's true people, and I just left God's false people. These people seem just as fractured as I am, and hey, yeah, we are. Except,
well, and another thing that we have, and I want to come back to that. Another thing that we have, and Audrey may be alluding to this, is let's say you have a New Ager, former New Ager, that is now coming into the church, and what is one of the first things that they start discovering is the church. This church I'm attending has yoga classes. Why would a Christian church have yoga? Something's not. Why did I leave the New Age? Or they're doing the Enneagram, and I saw Daniel has our book there. I don't know if he's cracked it yet.
I have not cracked this one, but my copy of it. This is my copy I'm giving away. My copy of it has been cracked a little bit.
It's been really cracked a little bit. Okay, good. But so I'm having people are contacting us and going, I left this. I thought.
Right.
And I received Christ, but now I'm not sure. Did I receive the right Christ? Should I just go back? The church I'm going to, and then they'll leave that church. We'll talk to them. And they don't contact me and say, where should I go now? Instead, they start searching it out. And the next church that goes into not only starts ridiculing the New Age, but making fun of their intelligence for being a New Ager.
Sure.
Before they even announced what they had been.
Right.
Now they don't. Now they're going. I don't. Where do I even go? I don't even know
what you're pointing out there, though, is a way in which we are different from cults, and that is, cults stress uniformity so much,
right,
that they would never let a yoga class in. We churches allow enough diversity and difference of opinion so that sometimes these bad things happen. In other words, there's a lack of discernment. Each congregation or each denomination allows its own level of discernment, and sometimes has not so great consequences.
And that's definitely something you see, in the Baptist world. We are free churches. So whatever my church decides to do is what my church has decided to do. There's not a whole lot of oversight or ability to instruct a free church what to do. I was raised up in a non-denominational church where we didn't even have a denomination or an association that we associated with. We were a non-denominational church, or non-denominational church, however you want to put all that.
Sounds like the auctioneer son.
Exactly. Yeah. Basically, if you could come in and get along, and until somebody asks a serious, hard question, then it might be allowed sometimes, And so I think that's why it's really important that we have people who are willing to dig in, and pastors who are willing to honestly consider it too, without necessarily allowing their feelings to be hurt so quickly.
And I'm in a denomination too now, whereas I would say for most of my Christian life, I wasn't. Well, how long have I been in this one? Yeah. So I could say that for most of my Christian life, I really wasn't in of an organized denomination. I was in the Plymouth Brethren for a while.
So you were like Will Rogers, sort of.
Yeah. No, I didn't belong to an organized denomination. I was a Plymouth Brethren. And then I was an independent Reformed Baptist for a while, and now I'm in the PCA. And, speaking of discernment, there was a song on the Beatles' White Album called Revolution Number 9. Number 9. Now the SBC has Resolution Number 9. They should come out with an oral collage for that. And we have, of course, the revoice problem, which hasn't really gone away, I don't think, in the PCA. So we have. We have we have churches who are leaving the PCA over that. Mm-hmm. And I think you guys have churches in the SBC on both sides of the issue.
Yeah. Yes, we do.
Pro and con anti Resolution Number 9 who are leaving because they're not happy with either that it's not being accepted or that it is.
So I came from being an atheist, and I have a pastor friend who unfortunately has kind of gone to the dark side in recent years, but he grew up agnostic in New Jersey, and we used to, over lunch, we would go, we have a problem. We didn't get the church before we became Christians, and our understanding hasn't improved a great deal since becoming Christians, because we viewed it as this kind of weird organization, this weird club that you had to admit you were a sinner to join, and then pretend the rest of your life you're not. I don't get funny.
That is so true.
That's the thing we try and encourage not to do, though, right? And whenever I welcome people into the church, I'll make sure that they know that we're not perfect. Our church is not perfect, and I even tell people, if you find a perfect church, don't join it. It's too much like you. There's gonna be some difficulty there, but we're not a perfect church, and I think we do commit one of those great sins where, every time we see, hey, Don, how are you doing? How are you doing, brother? And you would say, fine. I'm doing fine. Right. And we walk around. Meanwhile, we're struggling in our families, and we're struggling at work, and there's just a lot going on. And so that is a thing that we do have to overcome.
It is. And becoming family is part of that. And for, let's say, a Jehovah's Witness, who can't be real.
Yeah.
In fact, my wife, she had some wonderful friends who were Jehovah's Witnesses. And over time, it turned out they would talk to her about real family problems that they could not share with their Kingdom Hall family, quote unquote, because they would be taken before a committee.
Right.
And be dressed down for it, perhaps even kicked out. So, how do we help someone that's been in a group like Jehovah's Witnesses, an authoritarian group, kind of ease into the place of being able to be friends with someone that they can share, my daughter is rebellious and I don't know what to do. She's gotten hooked on drugs, without fear of being ostracized. On the other hand, one of the things that we see happening, like for New Agers coming in, is they have Enneagram. I mentioned that earlier, yoga, other kinds of things, sort of this knitting together of Christianity with something else, Eastern mysticism. And one of our sponsors actually has a product kind of addressing that.
Now, you know what, Don? I did not catch I did not even think that was even remotely a segue. I'm usually listening listening for your segues, and they're usually really right on. I don't know what happened this time, but we do have a sponsor. So one day, Rob Bell was walking along, not watching what he was doing, where he was going, and he smacked right into the Dalai Lama. Boom. And the Dalai Lama said, "Hey, you got Christianity in my Buddhism." And Rob Bell said, "Well, you got Buddhism in my Christianity." And then they decided that it's not all about truth, but experience. And isn't taste one of the best experiences? Two great faiths that taste great together. Reese's Jesus Buddha cups. You just got to try them. We're talking about, you have to agree that you're a sinner to get in the church, and then in so many churches,
and then pretend the rest of your life you're not. Yeah.
I have found that there's a lot of you do have to be deliberate in your approach. People have to hear from the pulpit that it's okay to admit you're a sinner, and to admit to specific sins. And I think the pastor can be the prime mover in that direction. But I've also found it helpful that that in our worship service, we have a time set aside, few minutes, for a private silent confession of sin and a general confession of sin. And then we follow it with an assurance of pardon. In other words, the scriptures that say, look, you confessed it. It's taken care of. And I think these things, the time in your worship service where we remind ourselves, hey, we're sinners, and that's okay. It's not okay. Sin isn't okay, but it's okay. But God knew we were going to. God, we're the kind of people God saves.
Absolutely. For us at our church, we do an altar call at the end. I know that's kind of it's got its own recent history, I guess, inside the church. But I find that it's very useful, just for that intentional time of recognizing that here was the word that was preached, and here's an opportunity to respond. You remind me, 1 John 1:9. If we confess our sins, we can go to him, and he's faithful and just to forgive us of our sins and cleanse us of all unrighteousness. You guys are looking like I misquoted that, so I'm going to go ahead and look it up.
But that's something we go to here. So
okay,
I'm contemplating, because I'm thinking, okay, what if you're not a Southern Baptist church that's used to altar calls? Is it a useful tool? Now I know Presbyterians, they're all into order and quiet. We would never do it. But I'm thinking that there are other reasons for an altar call than salvation.
Oh, absolutely.
It could be you just need to be prayed for. Maybe you're struggling with something. You are a former Jehovah's Witness. You're not feeling like you kind of fit into this church. You're grieving over the loss. For example, we had one couple that when they came out of the watchtower and came to the Lord, she lost 64 family members that day. It could have been an airplane crash. We'll never see them again.
Or an atomic bomb going off.
That's devastating.
Yeah, that's really hard.
I honestly, I don't know. I guess it's part of where the church is supposed to be a thing where it's your church family. You know what I mean? And so, like, whenever we have people that come in, whenever you got somebody that has gone through that kind of thing, I try and make sure that I do a lot of time listening. I share a few things with them about the church just so that way they know, like, they came in, they're brand new to it. Well, hey, here in a little bit, we're going to do these things. We're going to have service. It's going to look like this. At the end, we're going to have an altar call. You can respond however you'd like to. I always try and give a few kind of guideposts on how we're going to do things. But then the other thing I always encourage too is if you want to come back, we'd love to have you come back. But I kind of look at Sunday school as one of these places where not only can you get further Bible study and do some more learning, but Sunday school is a great place for facilitating those kind of deeper connections,
Right.
where you can have somebody that, maybe not in service. You're not getting up in service and say, hey, marriage is falling apart right now. But in Sunday school, you've got a couple of people there that you're meeting with and studying, sharing prayer requests with. There's a lot more of that tight knit community that's super valuable. And so, like, even if they're not coming from a cult, if they're just visiting our church, I always tell them, hey, you should come back, but make sure you come back and check out one of our Sunday schools, because I think that's just an incredible thing about the church, where we've got a smaller group and a little bit more of that personal, individualized concern, that kind of thing. And at the same time, like you had said, if you want to come to the altar and be prayed with, that's something we'll do as well. We're not gonna turn you away or say, hey, I'm sorry, you haven't been here long enough, or you're too far gone, or nothing. I mean, we would never do something like that. We want to welcome them in and encourage them and point them to the truth of what God's word says.
Well, sometimes it's a matter of intentionality. We're not always aware. You've said this several times that you want to listen, and I highly recommend that. In fact, when I have people call me, and I get it all the time, an email or a phone call, I have a Mormon coming, a Jehovah's Witness coming, and 20 minutes. What verse do I give them? And I call it the silver bullet syndrome. They think there's a magical verse that they can just whip right out and they'll become believers.
No.
And they're a little surprised when I say, well, A, we don't have one like that. B, I would recommend that you get out some coffee cake and some coffee or cold drink, and you ask them why they are what they are, and listen to what they say. They go,
yeah.
Why? Because they will tell you everything that you need to know to communicate the gospel to them at some point. But it takes listening to what they say, not well, as you pointed out, you're talking to someone who said, well, we don't believe that. We don't believe that. One of the fun experiences I had was a whole family had come out of the Watchtower some years ago. The husband had called me up. They have been Jehovah's Witnesses. Called me up and he said, we've seen your ad in the newspaper, and I want to come and talk with you. My wife, I might be able to get her to come and talk to you. We're Jehovah's Witnesses. Can you get her out? So that told me several things. He's already thinking about leaving, and she's not.
Right.
And I said, no promises. We'll pray about it, but we're glad to meet you. So they came over. We spent about 4 hours. And I used their Kingdom Interlinear, their purple Bible, to demonstrate that Jesus is Jehovah to them from their own Bible, which was pretty shocking to her. And they left. Now, on their way home, they got into a discussion about this, and they decided that they would call me, because one of the challenges she was going to issue is if I would not meet with the elders, she was going to ask me to meet with the elders, that would prove I was lying. So they called, and I was on the phone and I didn't know he was on the phone too. And she said, I don't really understand exactly what it was that you were saying. And by the way, one of the points that I made, kind of what started the story, is I had pointed out that the Father's on the throne and the Son is on the throne. We see that in Revelation. And she made a non-Watchtower response. She goes, I think the throne is like a really big couch and a lot of people are sitting on it. Now, I didn't even know what to do with that. And it didn't end up not becoming as relevant. But that's to the point of they don't necessarily follow the company line.
Well, I mean, if you were to pin down the people
I said this. Yeah, I said this. I said, no, I wouldn't talk with them by phone. And she smiled, I guess, and he was of a sad countenance. And then I said, I would rather meet him face to face. That changed the entire dynamic to such a point that 3 weeks later, after trying to get them to meet with me, her 11-year-old daughter, Jackie, went to talk with them. And they said, we don't really want to get into an argument. Came home and said, Mom, you said if Mr. Vino wouldn't talk with them by phone, that would prove they're lying. Doesn't it prove the Watchtower is lying if they won't meet with him? That 11-year-old is what brought them to the faith. Asking that question had nothing to do with any Bible verses I used.
Praise the Lord. Yeah. Praise the Lord. I'm happy to see anybody turn to Jesus Christ and a right understanding of who he is. However they got there, I'm happy that they got there.
Absolutely.
I was going to say too, though, on the same point, whenever it comes to dealing with somebody outside the church and knowing that their beliefs are not always, they're not always the same, right? They're always a little bit mixed up and all that. We suffer from that same problem though inside the church too. So we can have everybody that's coming into the church, and maybe we're a Southern Baptist church or we're a PCA church or whatever we are. If you were to poll the audience and do like is it Pew Research or whoever it is that does the Bible research, whatever, every year, where they're, what does it mean to be a Christian? What is, what is the Bible? That kind of thing. They're asking
the
questions.
Barna group.
Yeah, there you go.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah.
I read those and I get really upset every single time. I realize that is not perfectly exactly my people, but I also recognize that statistics says I've got a certain percentage of people in my church that are struggling in that same way. You know what I mean? To understand the Bible correctly, or to understand the purpose of the church, or what it means to be saved. And so I look and I think, the same sense that I might have an issue dealing with the person coming into the church from a cult, probably as I address some of those things, I'm also going to be addressing real needs inside my own church that they have intellectually as well. And being able to understand properly what the Bible says. So I don't think too, there was a period of time where I would have thought, I don't have time for that. I need to take care of this group of people over here. But the reality is, in taking care of this, we're also taking care of everybody else. Everybody's getting fed.
Right. That's really important, because it does a few things. It helps to sort of take away the mystery of that other group over there.
Yeah.
And explain to them, as well as your people, what the Bible actually teaches. For example, if you had a Wiccan come to your church, not a believer yet, but just got interested in sort of attending your church.
Right.
How is that going to impact, if you know they're a Wiccan, how you teach? How will that impact how you teach?
Well, I guess just knowing that they're there, one, it's going to inform how I'm going to be praying. And two, as I'm praying about that, that's also going to inform my study a little bit more, and maybe even inform a little bit of some of the little deep dives that you make. So if you're looking at a passage over here and you're looking at the fact that Jesus Christ, he's called Peter to walk out onto the water, and they get back in the boat and the wind stops. That's really incredible. But if you stop there, you miss the valuable little point that as soon as they got doing that, it says that the disciples worshiped Jesus and said, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Right there, we got Jesus Christ properly receiving worship and praise. And so, there's little places that you can go. If they were Wiccan, I'm not entirely sure that I know what I would look specifically at. I'd want them to know about our understanding of who Jesus Christ is, and understanding our view of a triune God and how he is to be worshipped. I'd want them to understand that God is the one that created everything, and that God is the one that is actively holding all things together. And I would want them to understand that we are a part of his creation, I guess, is kind of my beginning steps. I don't know. In my own ignorance, that's probably the direction I would jump off from. But I'd want to be able to find those little deep dives, especially as I'm looking at my preaching schedule and the things that I've got planned to be able to talk about, or passages we're going to be looking at, that kind of thing.
Right. And another thing that I suspect you would do, and I think other pastors should entertain doing, or at least have somebody in their church who will do this, to go out to lunch with them.
Absolutely.
Say, yeah. What do you? I've never met a Wiccan before. What is it that you believe? And you know what? They'll tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's just it. Just having the conversation, not immediately, doing this number or whatever and backing away in fear. That's ridiculousness.
Now there are some cults. I don't know how many there are, but I don't know what to call them, but xenophobic or some outsider. Back in the days of Herbert Armstrong's Worldwide Church of God, when it was just one cult, it was very rare that I ever ran into a member who would tell me they were a member. In fact, it only happened once, and that is in one of our local grocery stores, where they were putting literature in the racks for people to take. And the guy was doing it right in front of me. And I said, "Oh, so you're a member of the Worldwide Church of God?" And I wanted to engage him in a conversation. I asked him, "Can I visit your church?" He said, "No."
Right.
It's like, what? It's like, no, we just get too many crazies that want to come in off the street and disrupt things. And I go, oh, okay. And I was thinking of asking, like, how do you grow? How do you get new people? Well, they obviously had a method, but they wanted to keep me at arm's length. They don't want to get to know me. That was the way they were. I don't know if any of the offshoot cults that came out of that are still doing that. I don't know.
But you've seen right there in that single moment, the thing that you need to do to be able to hold yourself in distinction, to be able to have that conversation, right?
Right.
We don't want any crazies. Good news. I'm not crazy. And I want to be able to treat you with respect and kindness.
Yeah. I didn't, he was in a hurry.
Oh, okay. That's going to be hard.
And he didn't seem to be comfortable with the conversation itself. So I didn't have much of an opportunity.
Yeah.
He seemed to like not even, I mean, as soon as he found out I was interested in going as somebody who was, I would have thought he'd be overjoyed, but no, it was like, now I'm a threat. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well,
that was weird.
I don't know. The whole idea, though, of recognizing the person that's come to the church, wherever they've come from, recognizing, though, that they are somebody that is created in the image of God, recognizing that they are loved by God, recognizing that Jesus Christ died on the cross for them, I think that really ought to inform the way that we interact with people and the way that, the way that we would persist in a conversation, or, you know what I mean? Striving really hard not to treat those interactions as a disposable interaction with a disposable person, because they're not. I think that's been a big thing for me, and it doesn't even matter if they're coming from a cult or they're coming from another denomination or they're coming from nowhere. Just treating them with love and respect, I think, is a huge deal in exposing them to who Jesus Christ is and his love for them. That's what we're called to do.
It for sure is what we're called to do. It also, though, and we're going to kind of revisit this thing, because I've talked with so many pastors over the years. I'll get a call from someone. I just had this about 3 weeks ago, from a former New Ager, and she had 2 ladies that had contacted her about finding a church. Now they're Christians, have left the New Age, don't even know where to begin. As it happened, I had a friend in the area to kind of help me work on it, but I used to have to sit down and start calling churches in those areas and talking with pastors. I would get some who would say, we're not really equipped to help there. Okay, I can respect that. Maybe they're not ready. I've had some say, I don't know, but I am willing to learn. If you can help me, I want to minister to them. I would like you to send them to me. And then I recommend, and I have a link to the book in our description, Out of the Cults into the Church. And I say, this will really help you to understand at least what they're experiencing when they leave a group. And of course, you can call me anytime. I've had some pastors say, you don't have to worry about it. Just send them to us and we'll take care of them. Those pastors, I never send anyone there.
That's a little too prideful. But the position that's saying, hey, I maybe I don't know, but I'm ready to learn, I think that's always something to be applauded, I would imagine. Anytime you've got a group of people that are willing to learn and do the research and study, because the truth is we're not going to encounter everything,
Right.
we're not always ready for everything. That's just how it's going to be.
Right. And it does have to do with the person who's coming in also. And I had the couple I was alluding to earlier, once they came to the faith, the church, they ended up, I took them to the church. I had informed the pastor and the elders we were coming ahead of time. I took them to 2 or 3 churches, and they settled on this one. Well, the morning after they went in on Sunday, and he was in the office on Monday, and they showed up with a legal pad, 4 pages, every line written in with a question. And he called me and he said, what have you done to these people? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, they showed up with a legal pad, 4 pages of questions. I haven't had to think this hard since I left seminary 20 years ago.
But that's okay. That's okay for us to have to think a little bit. It's been a little while back, but I had I've got a missionary friend, and that's all I'll say, who's in a part of the world where Islam is the thing that is practiced. It's constitutionally mandated. And this missionary friend had invited us to respond to some questions from some girls that she was working with, and to answer their questions, because they had a test, and the state test actually involved having to answer questions from a Christian perspective in a Muslim country, and so why do you believe this, and why that kind of thing, to be able to test them and really push them. And I think honestly that test served in some ways to try and discourage some people from persisting in a Christian belief in the face of all that. And so they sent the questions to me, and I looked at that and I thought, that's an afternoon of work right there, answering those, digging in. But I did it, and it was so much fun to be able to look at them, and then also to be able to consider the fact that these kids that are asking these questions, they're people that God created and that He loves, and how awesome can it be, though, for us to be able to be there for one another? If it's a little bit of work, it's a little bit of work, but man, praise God for the opportunity for the work.
Well, it is. Now, I'm aware, and of course you're aware, and Ron is aware, that when someone's coming in from the outside, we don't know what baggage they may be bringing, what belief systems they may be engaged in, even what purpose they may be attending. They may be in search of God, or they may be trying to set you up for some sort of lawsuit these days. So, there's that problem. But then also those who are coming in who are genuinely seeking can't always distinguish between what is heretical, because it sort of is living in the church, and what is not heretical. And so dealing with heresy can be a really difficult thing, both into church and outside the church. And sometimes you might get concerned that heresy will just evaporate from the face of the earth.
Yeah, that would be a terrible thing. Yeah, if that were to happen, we would have to agree that the situation is dire. You know what? The situation already is dire. According to the latest research, at the present rate of consumption, our supply of heresies will be completely depleted by 2050. The consequences will be disastrous. If this happens, most cults will close their doors by the end of the century, and most heretical websites will completely disappear from the internet, not to mention the fact that 75% of what passes as Christian programming will disappear from the airwaves and cable TV. What will we do, Don?
I don't know.
How will we occupy our time? Well, the solution is simple. Heresy recycling. Whether you're online, visiting a church, or out at the mall, you can do your part. Always look for the label, the HCB label, the Heresy Conservation Board, ensuring sustainable errors for the 21st century and beyond. Yes, we need to sustain. We need to make sure it's sustainable. And it's. But you're right. People, when cultists go into churches, as ex-cultists, as baby Christians, we have to allow that some of them have quite a bit of Bible knowledge, some of them, which is a pretty interesting situation. Some of it's pretty messed up Bible knowledge. Yep. I had a friend named Mark who basically was ejected from the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society back in 1976 after the failed 1975
End of the World Prophecy,
Armageddon prophecy. He worked downtown. He lived in the city, and he got around in the downtown area a lot. He actually worked at the Board of Trade. And one day he's walking to the train station or something, and he runs into some people from JPUSA, Jesus People USA. And they start witnessing to him, and they go, "Do you know who Jesus is?" He goes, "Oh yeah, he's Michael the Archangel." And he's out of the Watchtower Society. He's left. He's convinced that they're not right. He's already being slandered. They're already spreading false information about him. When you leave the Watchtower Society, you leave under a cloud. Right. And so the rumor mill starts up pretty soon after that. Well, what happened? They charged him with the usual thing, conduct unbecoming a Christian. So the rumor on the street was he's a heroin addict. Now, you had to know Mark. Mark was a very skinny guy. He was born skinny. It looked like a good hard wind could blow him away at any time. He was that skinny. So I could see how the heroin thing got started, but here he is, and he's got tons of Bible knowledge. He's given talks at Watchtower, the Kingdom Hall talks. Now he's just trying to figure out what to do next. And he said he spent, I don't know, like several hours in a restaurant with a couple of Japuzas, Jesus people. And they started kind of de-brainwashing him. It was just the beginning of a very, very long process. He never joined the Jesus people, which I'm kind of glad for, but
for other reasons.
For other reasons, but at least they knew enough of the gospel to help him out. And so they come in with Bible knowledge. It's very warped Bible knowledge, and they don't have the discernment yet to figure out whether they're in an Orthodox church. In fact, Mark in the beginning, he went into a pretty unorthodox church, a pretty liberal church, which he finally figured out after a few years was not going to be the place for him. So
that's going to take time, though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the case. It's going to take time to be able to figure out where you're at, and I guess what's right.
It is, a lot of times when we're writing articles like our blog or different kinds of articles, I try to have somebody in mind who I know believes what it is that we're writing about or is involved in some way.
Sure.
Because you know from our commercials and you've hung around with me a little bit. I like satire. I love jokes. I like making fun of stuff. I just think it. But I have to sometimes back up and say, wait a minute. I have a real person on the other end of this issue that I'm writing about. Do I have to intentionally offend them?
No.
No.
No, you don't. And we've got a responsibility too, right? To make sure that we are not adding to the offense of the gospel. The gospel is offensive enough all on its own. The gospel tells me that I am a sinner. I cannot be good enough on my own. I do not do good. The passage that we often quote from that, our righteousness is as filthy rags. Here in the United States, we have no idea hardly what's actually being referred to there. You know what I mean? And if we did, I think we would go, we'd be in shock at the idea of such a graphic image being used to describe our righteousness on our own. No, we're sinners, and that's what the gospel tells us. And that's not a whole lot of fun to deal with right there on its own,
Right.
I don't know. I think too. I think humor though is something that can still be used in a lot of conversations. Yeah. I love people have a conversation with somebody that's new. At the same time, I'm probably more inclined to run to the kind of humor that steps on Daniel a little bit. And I don't mind being the target of the joke if that'll I'll be the fool for Christ. I think that is something that's totally something that we can do, as long as it allows that person that's coming in to feel comfortable, to feel like, we're not immediately judging them. That's part of the work of that's the work of the Holy Spirit right in there. And anyway, it's really kind of neat to be able to see and be able to do that, to be able to just have fun with somebody, listen to them, have fun. But then at the same time, recognizing that, yeah, you're right. Those kinds of things can really get in the way if we're not careful.
Well, they can. Now, for churches, if pastors are listening, or if this is passed on to pastors and churches, you've alluded to this a couple of times, and something that you practice, which is meeting the individual, but it needs to almost be facilitated by other people within the church, because we tend to live in cliques, so to speak. You were talking about. You used to sitting with Bob over at lunch or whatever, and that's who you kind of always hang around with. And those friendships are important. But when you have someone new in the church, intentionally, not just shaking their hand, but maybe inviting them to lunch, inviting them to dinner, inviting them for a Coke, doing something to say, I'd like to engage with you other than coming to your house, because that's going to make them nervous.
Especially today, people. I run into a lot of people who are not super excited at the idea of having somebody come over to their house or to knock on their door and surprise. That's not That's not a modern idea so much anymore.
Right. How long might you stay? How do I entertain you? What is that? There's a lot of questions.
The laundry's still on the couch and it ain't been folded.
Exactly. Yeah.
The kids are running around half naked. What does that say about me? People worry about all those things.
Yeah, I was leader in a church a few years back that we had kind of looked at the geography of the church, and then created like 5 leaders in different geographical areas. And when someone would visit, they'd fill out a little visitor's card. Well, and the pastor would give it to the leader in that area. I would get them. I look at them and I go, okay, this is a single female that's about this age. So I would find a single female in our group and say, would you contact? And they would. They'd contact them. They'd go out for Starbucks or whatever and meet. They had an equal ground. If it was an elderly couple, I had an elderly couple I would put onto it. Now, that did several things. It got them sort of out of their, as church members, their comfort zone to meet new people. And it engaged people who are coming in to say, maybe they're not as scary, because the watchtower said, this church is full of demon-possessed people, and they're kind of normal, actually.
No thing. None at all.
Yeah, it doesn't occur to them that the people they see in these churches are probably people they're bumping into all over the place.
Right.
In grocery stores, in everywhere, movie theaters. So you would think that the evidence of demonic possession would be evident and
more evident, yeah,
all over the place. I mean,
right.
What percentage of the United States goes to church? I don't know, 20%?
I don't know.
That may be high. I don't know.
15? Well, if we say it's 10%, that means 1 out of every 10 people you bump into on the street, according to the Watchtower, is demon possessed. So you'd think you would have bumped into somebody with really obvious signs of that by now.
Well, I think that's part of the reason too. Whenever these people come into the church, anybody coming into the church, going to them, greeting them, welcoming them, talking with them, explaining some things to them, about how, so that way they're not surprised by something, just it begins that process of seeing that we're regular people. The only thing that makes us different is the fact that we have Jesus Christ and what he's done for us. That is the only thing there.
Ron said something earlier, which applies to Jehovah's Witnesses and other groups, is uniformity. Now, they claim they have unity. What they have is uniformity, and they're 2 different things. So someone comes to your church now, and they're trying to sort out, okay, what do I have to believe to be part of the group? Could they come to believe Jesus is fully God and the doctrine of Trinity and the Incarnation, for example, but think, gosh, we should have wine in the communion. Why aren't they having wine in the communion? How do you deal with those sorts of disagreements to say, okay, here's our tradition, we don't agree with you, but you're welcome to that idea?
One, I approach it humbly, I hope, is how I try and do it. I try and also make the distinction that there's differences, there's different kinds of disagreements, right? So if we don't agree that Jesus Christ is the second person of the Trinity, well, then we got 2 very different things that we believe in, and we believe in 2 different gods. There are going to be other things that are going to be kind of on a secondary level, and they're going to be a little bit of a bigger disagreement. And those secondary levels, they're going to be the reason why I'm Southern Baptist and over here you're PCA, so there are going to be some differences there, but then you've got those 3rd level differences. And man, I try and encourage the church that whenever it comes to the 3rd level differences, these are things where we can sit inside the pews of our church and sit beside somebody who holds a different view and still worship God. And know that we're brothers and sisters in Christ. And even on some of the 2nd level issues, we can still worship God. And know that there's going to be more than Southern Baptists in heaven. What's the joke or whatever, whenever we get to heaven, all the other people that aren't Southern Baptists have been told to be quiet so they don't bother us Southern Baptists in heaven because we think we're the only ones. I don't want that. I want us to recognize, there's going to be some differences, but on the key important doctrines, the doctrine of who Jesus Christ is, who our God is, how our salvation comes to us, that we're saved by grace through faith, not a result of works, so that no one can boast. These are important things that we have to agree on. The other things, there ought to be room And there ought to be a comfortable enough, a sense of being comfortable enough to be able to openly discuss those things, So like we want to have that discussion about the communion and the elements and how we're supposed to prepare those elements. Yeah, let's have that discussion. But it should be one that we can openly have without fear of like, well, this is what I always thought. Well, now we're going to shoot you down and beat you up for that. No, it ought to be just like with your family, with your kids. Your kids come to you and they got some wrong idea. Oh, honey, no, that ain't how it actually is. Let me tell you how it really is, because I want you to know the truth. Yeah, well, well, in Texas, bless your heart means something totally different. But that loving, kind way of approaching somebody and respectfully desiring to have that dialogue in order that not that you might win, but that in order that the truth might be reached. I think that's really important. Go back to that, our big apologetics passage that we're always using, always be prepared to make a defense for the hope that's within you, yet doing it with gentleness and respect.
Right.
And so like these are really important ideas, and especially whenever we're encountering people coming into the church that are coming from vastly different backgrounds. I think that there is room for those people to sit down and listen and learn, and room for them to be able to ask questions, and praise God if they do and they get those questions answered.
Well, just before we go, I want to tell a little story that I use often when I get a question from, say, a Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon or even a New Ager. Why are there so many differences in churches, number one, or even within your church? And I do it this way. So the church is not an organization. It is a family. It's an organism. Now, in my family, my son and daughter were raised under the same roof by my wife and I. I have to tell you something. We don't agree on everything. She has a different household. She has some traditions that are different than she grew up with here. And she's still family. Even if we disagree, she's still family. Because the thing that unites us is the blood and the birth. And what unites us as Christians is, guess what? The blood and the new birth.
Yeah.
We become family that way. So we may have some different traditions. We may have some different understandings of things. We may have some different practices, but we're still family. And we can agree to disagree. We don't have to shoot each other down. And even if you're an unbeliever visiting our family, we want you to feel welcome. We want you to continue coming and feel welcome. And we want you to ask questions. We do not want you to try to take over, because you're not family yet.
Well, and I think that's the big distinction there too. We're not at the point of saying, hey, we welcome you in and all ideas are equal, and that, no, it's not the case. What's true, and the beliefs that we hold them convictionally, but we can do that with kindness and love and respect for one another and for those that come as well.
All right, Daniel, how do people get a hold of you? Your link to your church is in the description, but how would they get a hold of you other than that?
Well, I guess if they wanted to reach out to me, they could always email me. My email address is pastorweyand@gmail.com, and you can look at my little name card there to be able to spell my last name. If you just want to be able to shoot me an email, I'll try and respond as best I can. I will tell you, just like I would tell anybody else who would call me up in person, I would say I don't know everything, but I'm willing to have a conversation, and I'm certainly willing to be able to spend some time with it. So I'm learning, I'm growing, and I look forward to see what God can do next.
Well, that's good. And anything I don't know, I just send them to Ron.
There you go. Ron, I need to be able to get a hold of you then, I guess, is what I need to be able to do.
And Ron, speaking of Ron, you want to walk us out of here?
Why not? Let's escort you out of the building. Resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Our culinary services come from Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil provisioner is Just In Case. Our Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and The Opposer. Our Mormon archives manager is Polygamous. Our liberal denominations bureau chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issue coverage comes from Ben Hur. Our special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys, Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Yoleg Pulling. Our technical assistants come comes from murky research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Our grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisami. Our director of privacy assurance is wiretapping, and our original idea sourcing comes from Drew a Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, what did I say? Both of whom are solely responsible for this content, but you will never be able to prove that in a court of law.
Never, ever happen.
Well,
all right, Dan, say goodbye, folks.
In a B,
That's
that's all, folks.
Bye-bye.